Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sport Hut podcast. Like a women's book club, just with less wine and more drama. So, big week for sport, guys, especially this weekend with the Six Nations starting. Some big games: Scotland and England at Twickenham, Wales and Ireland, and of course Italy and France. So I'm going to go with the one of us who knows a bit more about rugby. I'm going to go to Mitchell, proving that lockdown has done a bad job for your haircut. Anyway, Mitchell, what did you think about this weekend's action?
Well, Scotland result. It was amazing. It was just a perfect game plan from Gregor Townsend, and I think that I've seen some of the excuses coming out from the England camp saying the Saracen boys weren't up to speed. They were ring rusty. Saracens in the English League haven't played much since they got done for breaking contract and their player and their wage cap rules. So all your Owen Farrells, Maro Itojes, Billy Vunipola, they've not really played much, and they're saying it's their ring rust. It's like, well, Eddie Jones picked them. We just outplayed them. It's not our fault. You just couldn't pick a team that's performing.
Mitchell, as not a rugby fan, I watched the Ireland v Wales game today. Ireland is my team in the rugby, but when watching it, I thought Scotland could beat these teams. They both were error-ridden. They were inconsistent. Do you think Scotland can beat both these teams, particularly with home advantage?
For what they showed, Scotland, I think over the years, Scotland have always shown, yes, they can beat them. Its question is, will they show up and beat them?
I think Scotland played a really good game and against a strong team. Like, England is a very strong team, and they've shown that consistently over the years. And the way Scotland started, I think they could actually ace it and end up winning the full thing, and I wouldn't be surprised. But then the thing is, Scotland then always gets too comfortable after one win, and then start making errors in the second game or the next game. So that could be the biggest issue, I would say.
Mitchell, is Saracens like Rangers, but Saracens still exist?
No, actually. Saracens haven't gone bust, they just broke spending rules.
So they're like Man City.
There was no competitive advantage gained, I think you'll find.
One thing though, Mitchell, Finn Russell being an experienced player, right? What was he thinking about sticking his leg out like that, trying to trip him up? Like, he's an experienced player. He's been in that squad for years. What was he thinking?
I have no idea, but what I think's quite fascinating is it's not the first time I've seen that sort of yellow card given for tripping.
Right.
Like, and usually you say that it's like, it was years ago, but no, it was like, must have been I think it was start of the year. I think I was watching Bristol Bears versus, I think maybe Sale Sharks. And it happens, and you're just looking at it going, I've never seen that rule before, so it's something that's coming in, and for a player like Finn Russell, it's a stupid thing to do.
Yeah, I know. But
he's the number 10, he's the playmaker. If anyone's going to make it, it's going to be him. He's not going to be one to stick his head in for a tackle all the time. We're taking easy option.
Yeah. Gavin, what did you think about the result? We can see you're wearing the Scotland rugby jersey proudly. So what was your emotions while watching the game?
I think for everyone, it was kind of one of those games where you're like, can we do it? We've kind of been known to not perform our best in the Six Nations. I think especially we saw when we put up our post up before the game that John commented saying that he didn't think that we'd managed to win because we'd be too error prone, too many penalties, and it turned out to be the complete opposite from what he thought, where England were giving away all the penalties and we were managing to take advantage of that. I think my disappointment in the game was that we didn't get enough tries. There was a lot of times we were in there 22 and we could have made the pressure count, but we didn't, unfortunately. I just think that was one of those things where a bit more calm and composure, it might have worked for us. But I think it was a very good game and a very good day to be Scottish and watching the rugby, especially ending the route it's been at Twickenham in recent memory.
1983 for the last time it was, isn't it?
Am I the only one that doesn't watch or like rugby at all and think it's all weird egg chasing guys hunting each other?
I would probably say yes.
Yeah, fair enough. The only time I ever watch rugby is usually the Scotland-England game, and it's up until Scotland are getting beat and they'll turn over.
Did you watch it yesterday? Because they stayed ahead.
I didn't watch it yesterday because I was working.
There you go.
And they stayed ahead. So maybe you should.
Calcutta Cup, you just shouldn't watch.
Yeah. To be fair, it's rugby, and it's not going to be very hard not to. It's a weird egg-chasing sport, and you're welcome to it. Yeah. It's all the people that are jumping on the bandwagon that have never seen rugby before in their life, and now they're donning their boots. Oh, it was a great rugby game. They tackled and they done this. No clue.
As you can see, I'm wearing the British Lions top, so I obviously watch rugby. But Mitchell, as a rugby fan, why Gavin was talking about the errors and John commenting about Scotland making the errors before the game, but during the game, England were making the errors. Why was that?
I think it does go as I just dismiss the excuse of the Saracens players being ring rusty. I think there'll be a slight element of that. Like if they've not played competitive rugby for a couple of months, so they will have struggled. And also, I just think it was partly the pressure Scotland were putting on them, and how quick we got off with our defensive line. I think it was Harris in the backfield. He was just driving our defence forward every time they picked up from a ruck, and it just didn't give them the time to think. Whereas usually Scotland can be a bit standoffish, can try and play like a Super Rugby team. Super Rugby being like your South Africa's, Australia, and New Zealand rugby teams. And they're sort of like one tackle in, stand off, and then let the ball reset. Whereas this time we were a lot more aggressive, and we were attacking the ball, and the players trying to put them under pressure, stop them going forward, and get the turnovers, which we were.
James, to pick up on something that you said when you started speaking, first of all about home advantage, I think that kind of brings us back to our first episode, where we spoke about the lockdown effects on football in particular. And where it was Martin that made the point about is there a home advantage or not a home advantage because the crowd isn't there. What you saying about home advantage being a big element in rugby, the atmosphere in a rugby game is so deafening. I think that especially at Twickenham, if the crowd was there, we would not have stood a chance.
No, I agree with you. I think with the score so close going into the final minutes yesterday, if there was a full Twickenham with the majority of fans being English, I think Scotland may have crumbled, particularly with the nearly 40 years of not winning at Twickenham.
Yeah.
The pressure and expectation of a Scottish win may have been too much for the players. We saw that 2 years ago when Scotland were winning with a couple of minutes to go and England scored a last-minute try to win the game. So I think an empty stadium does benefit the away team and may evaporate home advantage. And Bruce, you were talking about that a couple of weeks, last week's episode about Rangers benefiting from a lack of home advantage and the lack of fans in the stadium. Do you think Scotland might be benefiting from that in the rugby?
Empty stadium.
Yeah, 100.
Also, it's Celtic to a T, doesn't it?
Typical Rangers fan always bringing it back to Celtic.
And flag. The flags.
Another point for Celtic.
Typical. I think it's going to suit Scotland 100% because there is that we do have, as Mitchell said, we have that element where we end up being rather standoffish, but with there not being any crowds in the stadium, we'll be able to take advantage of the lack of crowds and hopefully turn that around. We saw that in London, and the only team I think we're going to struggle with at the moment, with the way things have been going, is France. If Scotland can, play the way they were playing against England, I reckon we'll take Wales and Ireland. Italy are nothing at the moment. France are the only team that we're going to have an issue with, I think.
Well, I think France made their errors as well, but Italy's not a team that France was ever going to lose against, though. So again, against a stronger team like England, Wales, or Ireland, or even Scotland, I think France might struggle as well. Italy is just, I don't know what happened to Italy, man. Like seriously, I was watching them and they were walking to the ball. I think it was the third try. They were walking to the ball, where I think somebody just kicked it up and that red cap guy caught it, and then Dupont got it and he chucked it over his left shoulder.
At least you managed to do one player and all that.
I only know one player in France, Dupont. Red cap guy, yeah.
I think to pick up on what Bruce and Shahan have said there, I think Bruce won't be far wrong with France being a main challenger. But
I agree with that. I totally agree with that.
But I think the Italy game, as you said, is I think flattered them. I think Italy are a very young team, and you look at like the Guinness Pro 14, Pro 12, whatever.
Yeah.
How many teams are actually playing it now? Because I don't think South Africans are in it. You look at the Italian teams like Zebra, and they're not the greatest of teams. And when they are doing well, it's all their old veterans, not the young boys, which Italy are putting out. Whereas France, they've got the full top 14 league in France to choose from. And well, you look at teams. You look at some of the teams that are playing there, like Racing 92. We had Finn Russell's their number 10, Clermont Angers. Last year, their number 9 was Greg Laidlaw, former Scotland captain. And you look like they're doing well in the European Champions, and they're getting beat by the Irish teams. So I think Ireland are probably another big contender, and I think the red card today is what definitely I think hindered them because.
They were playing even after the red card. They were playing like a team that was going to win it. It was just unfortunate for them.
They lost 21-16 or something.
21-16, one try.
And
Billy Burns made a very stupid kick in the final minutes. Should have kicked it into touch.
The referee made a good point that fair enough, you were low, but you were still at the head. You tackled exactly on the head, so and that's grounds to go. Do you know what I mean? Which is fair, but Ireland played like a team that could have won. Just unfortunate for them.
You can see, I can pick up on that one last point. You can see where there's a clear indication. They go to TMO and they go, oh, you've hit, okay, there's no intention. You've clearly hit him in the head, rather than and Mike Dean going, oh, you've just grazed him as you've moved your arm. That's a red card. You've not looked at it.
We might talk about Mike Dean later on. But
he'd love that.
But Bob, you've been very quiet thus far. Are you a rugby fan?
I'm one of those, when Wimbledon comes around and everybody in the country is Kenny
Fair.
I'm one of those. I can understand rugby, I can get it, and I can appreciate good rugby. But I am the rugby equivalent to a Wimbledon fan.
Fair enough.
So Robert, you're the equivalent. You're the equivalent to what Martin was talking about. The people who come in and they say, "Oh, there was a tackle," and that. You are that person.
Yeah. Okay. I think Mitchell was talking about France and maybe Ireland being good contenders, but it'd be good to just go around the group and see where people think will predict the outcome of the Six Nations. So maybe 30 seconds for each person to explain who they think will be first, and then go all the way down to sixth in the Six Nations. So we'll start with Gavin.
Hey, James, I think we should start with Martin for his brilliant our first unofficial piece of merchandise.
Yeah, the egg chasing game.
What do we think?
Yes, that was brilliant.
Officially our first unofficial piece of merchandise.
Martin, can you make that official and pass it on to the full group, please?
Well, there is actually going to be a competition going on Facebook and possibly Twitter, James. That'd be right.
Yes, Twitter definitely.
Twitter and Facebook. So if you'd like to win this very sweat-ridden T-shirt,
he'll wash it first. We'll make sure he washes it.
Oh well, it will be sanitised in some way, shape, or form. Keep an eye on
COVID
Facebook.
compliant.
COVID compliant.
Keep an eye on Facebook and Twitter, and we will see if we can win you one. Anyway,
Martin, I've got one question for you.
Yes.
Yes, Gavin.
Yes.
What was the question?
Yes, Gavin.
No waiting.
Oh.
Do you know?
Do you know?
Do you know?
It doesn't work for you a lot. It only works for me. None of you wear it well.
Martin, do you know how the Six Nations is going to end?
Do you know I do? Top of the league will be Scotland. I think that's plain and simple to see.
Is
then
that biased,
Wales,
is it?
that goes on all my expertise on the subject, by the way. Every ounce of expertise and every algorithm, every ratio. I've looked into this in depth. So Scotland, then Wales, then Ireland, then France, then Italy. I think Italy just has like weird little Roman people running about. And then England last. I reckon
That's wow.
So, going from egg
I
chasing
apologize to any of our
to
English viewers. He was lying.
so going from egg chasing to Wimbledon, Bob, what do you think will be the outcome of the Six Nations from 1st to 6th?
I think it will be Wales, Ireland, Scotland, France, Henman.
So Henman making the quarterfinals, very consistent. Bob, that's a good, well, we might say reasonable prediction until 4th place. So Shahan, who do you think will be
right, there we go.
Nations order?
Unbiased opinions: France, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, England, Italy.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Gavin.
Unfortunately, I don't think England will finish as low down as that.
Unfortunately, I don't either.
With their chariots. I think Italy will finish last. That's kind of a given. I would love to see Scotland win it, but I don't think they will. I think it'll be Wales, England, France. I'll go for Scotland. It'll be nice, and then Ireland and Italy.
Okay. Bruce.
Well, I think, first of all, before I start this, what I forgot to say was when we were praising the weekend's action was that this weekend was full of a lot more action than Mitchell and James see on a Saturday night. But
obviously, it's COVID. We can't see anyone.
We're obliging the rules.
They are obliging the rules.
No. We're talking about a pre-COVID Saturday night, boys.
Talking about social distancing.
Back when you could be as close to people as you wanted and everything. So
I
I've got
couldn't get there.
France, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, England, Italy.
Okay. Where was Scotland in that?
Third.
Okay.
A possible second, but I went third.
Okay. Before Mitchell, because Mitchell is the person in the group that knows the most about rugby, I'm going to say Scotland. I'm going to go out there and say Scotland. I just think
unbiased opinion.
I think Wales, Ireland, and Italy at home will be enough for Scotland to oversee. Then I'm going to go for Ireland, France, England, Wales, Italy.
Interesting.
Mitchell, prove us all wrong. What's the order going to be?
I think these are all basing it off the first. I think these are all basing off the first results and not actually looking at performance. I'm going to go Ireland first, despite their loss. Going to go Scotland second, despite having to go to France, and that's always a dangerous game for us. Then I'm going to go France, England, Wales, and then Italy.
Write that down. I bet you that comes in.
That order. I took a note of everyone. I've took a note of everyone. We'll be coming back to this after the end of the Six Nations. After the Six Nations is finished, we'll be coming back to these league tables and seeing how wrong all of us are.
How wrong Mitchell is and how right Bruce is.
Can we find out the betting odds for Mitchell's guess and just stick a couple of quid on it?
I think that's a good idea.
I'm sure you can actually find that somewhere on Bet365.
That's my idea.
But
I have faith in it.
Talking about home advantage, we were talking about Scotland having Ireland, Wales, and Italy at home and France away. Obviously, this year we have no fans at the Six Nations. Gavin was mentioning this earlier. So, Bob, do you think there's any home advantage in the Six Nations this year?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think there is. Like we said earlier, fans are a massive part of rugby, and I think if you've lost that, then they really are the driver for a lot. And I think it was you, James, that made the point that had Scotland been in Twickenham in the score that they were on with Twickenham full, I don't think there is a home advantage, because I think that so much of the home advantage is made by the fans, really.
And Gavin, you were saying that as well. If Twickenham was full, Scotland may have not have won yesterday. So, taking the wider Six Nations as a whole, other than just the Calcutta Cup, do you think home advantage has evaporated because there's no fans at all?
Oh, definitely, especially during the national anthems. And I was sitting there and I was unmotivated, completely unmotivated, sitting watching it, listening to the national anthems, because you don't see the real passion. The players aren't grabbing each other and hugging each other, and you don't have the fans screaming and shouting as loud as they can, getting right behind the team. So I do think it's non-existent.
It depends on the national anthem as well. Like, Scotland has a beautiful national anthem, and not God Save the Queen, "O Flower of Scotland," and then "O Flower of Scotland." Sorry, I was trying to get to my point, but then England come up with "God Save the Queen." Don't get me wrong, I love I don't love, but I don't
appreciate it.
I'm not against. I'm not against royalty or nothing like that, but England need a more fucking oomph anthem, which I don't think they have.
Okay, taking Shahan's point about appreciating "God Save the Queen," I'll say I love "God Save the Queen," and both my national anthems were played in the Calcutta Cup yesterday. But Bruce, national anthems, obviously they motivate teams, and particularly if the fans are singing it with passion. Do you think a lack of fans will result in a lack of motivation in the players?
So
yes,
first of all, to quote Billy Connolly, after what you were talking about, I think the Queen should be saved, and if anyone was to save her, God's the very chap. However,
I
think God succeeded.
Flipping this argument on its head, right? So Scotland went down to England, no fans, absolutely smashed it. Flip this on its head. I think Scotland and Murrayfield has one of the best atmospheres, and obviously I'm being biased. However, having stood in the middle of that park during the national anthem and had 60-odd thousand fans singing back at you when the mass pipes and drums go quiet, the atmosphere in there is phenomenal. So flip that on its head. Could Scotland be victim to no fans and that having a reverse impact at Murrayfield when we've got three teams at home that you're talking about, James? And that's why I've put them down third, because if these three teams are at Murrayfield and we've not got that buzzing Scottish, atmosphere that we're used to, could that then have a reverse impact on Scotland?
I certainly agree with you, Bruce, and I've been on that pitch as well with yourself during the national anthem, and it is just a buzz. You just have, it's just exhilarating. You just have a great energy about you for the next couple of hours, even if you're not playing the game. And Gavin, you have also been on the pitch with Bruce and I.
Thanks for eventually including me in that, by the way.
All of that.
I was going to say, so have I.
and Shahan as well. So I'll go to you, Gavin. How did it feel being on Murrayfield for the national anthem, and particularly when the pipes and drums quieten down and it's just the fans singing, motivating the team?
But you get goosebumps straight away. You get goosebumps,
definitely.
and the thing that I find is when the players come out before the national anthem even starts. The players come out and you've got the big flares go off. Now you could be standing near enough the centre of the park and you feel the heat coming off of them, and that just you then and there, and the roar of the crowd, it's a spectacle. That's the best word I can describe.
I was pretty much on top of them when I was in part Air Cadets. I got to carry the Scottish flag. And I was, it's brilliant, honestly, especially when the team goes past you as well. Honestly, it's brilliant. And
Shahan, that gives a different definition to you being a rocket, mate.
Well, you were all pipers, so would
Same
principle.
You have created great division in this chat. There is one piper and two drummers in this chat.
Drummers drum a lot of shite anyway.
Well,
and you're talking a lot of shite.
Just
order. I am Jackie Weaver. I've got the authority to kick you off the chat if you do not uphold the standing orders. I have read them and I understand them.
You said them to us because I've not seen them.
Call me Britney Spears.
Well, maybe on a Friday night. But Mitchell, we were just talking about Bruce, Gavin, Chahan, and I being on the pitch and experiencing the national anthem and the fans. As a fan of Scottish rugby, how does it feel when all the fans come together in Murrayfield to support the team? And do you think you give the team the extra edge when you're collectively together?
I'll start this off because I'll tell you this sums up rugby crowds. It's one of my favourite moments ever. It was Scotland, England, Six Nations, must have been 4 or 5 years ago now. 2016, I think. 2015, 2016. You've got Scottish, you've got couples of Scottish in front, you've got 2 or 3 rows back, you've got a couple of Italian fans. We're absolutely hammering in Italy. One of the guys in front turns round to the Italian guys, because the Italian fans are sitting, singing, still trying to keep their going, just enjoying the game, which I love, because like they're 2 foot away from a Scottish guy with a pint. One of the guys in front of me turns round and goes, What's Italian for your pish? And it's just like, they had no clue what was said, but it's just sitting there, you just see everyone just start laughing. It's like, nowhere else would you get that. And I think, and then to move on to actual
that as
being...
well, Mitchell. Carrying on from that, that's another thing I like about rugby, as opposed to football, is that the kind of, even if you're supporting other teams, you're still kind of sitting with each other, and it's not a bad atmosphere. It's like even if you're supporting different teams, it's still a very good atmosphere, and everybody's kind of singing together, drinking together, and kind of, joining in. And that's what I like about Scottish fans. The rugby fans.
Scotland game. What the Scottish fans would sing to Italy was deep fry your pizzas. We're going to deep fry your pizza. And that's the difference between Scotland and football and rugby.
See that game that we went to, all of us went as fans, and got the tickets for. I think it was Samoa, wasn't it?
It was Samoa, it was for my birthday.
But even then, during the game, you had like a pipe going on this corner, a pipe going on that corner, and then everybody started singing "O Father Scotland," and you just see that different change and like a pickup in the team. So I think that the kind of crowds do help that push that team along, especially in those kind of like tense moments.
I remember that game greatly. I'm a regular at Celtic Park, and obviously the fans, the Green Brigade. I'm obviously not in the Green Brigade myself. My Tory views wouldn't allow me in the Green Brigade, but at Murrayfield, it was a collective togetherness amongst all the Scottish fans, and just getting behind the team, and even against Samoa, who, no disrespect to any Samoans watching the podcast, you're not the best rugby team, so I can only imagine being in Murrayfield for 80 minutes against England, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa. It just must be incredible coming collectively as a country together. But Martin, obviously as a Hibs fan, you haven't experienced that. So as a Hibs fan, how do you think you would experience Murrayfield when 60,000 fans, and never mind, is it 5,000 you get for a game, come together to back the team?
Not even that.
So many issues what you just said.
Shall we just leave it there and move on then?
if you can ever muster the courage to be in Easter Road while they're singing Sunshine on Leith, and you'll get a good idea of what and
I need to go into the playlist on my Apple Music to hear that.
When the Hibs fans are singing Sunshine and Leith, and then Rudy Scatchell scores a worldie. Brilliant memories.
Yeah.
Martin, explain what you're going to say.
So, I think most teams have an anthem of some sort. That sort of go-to song. That song that I'll try to keep it more in football that I know rather than going to rugby, where obviously Liverpool, they'll have the.
You'll Never Walk Alone.
They'll Never Walk Alone.
The one that Celtic stole.
Yeah. So. And there's always a team, even West Ham with Forever Blowing Bubbles and stuff. There's always that one song that they'll have the hair standing up on the back of your neck, and if the players are a fan of that team, that's the one thing that sort of will keep them going through the game and make them fight that wee bit harder. And if there's no fans in there to sing that or to help them, then I think it's difficult to play 100%, maybe get up to 90-95%, but to get up to that 100% that to get full effect, you kind of need the fans there.
Mm-hmm. No, that's. I think I agree with that, and I say that as a Celtic fan who's seeing a season go into disarray. But I think it's been a fascinating conversation about the Six Nations home advantage and who do we think will finish where. And I have took a note of that. So whoever is the closest will win some form of prize. We'll have to agree what that form of prize is. I think Mitchell is the favourite.
Please comment on our videos to see what your list is, please.
Yeah, indeed. Comment
had I known there was a prize, I would not have said Tim Henman.
But no, that is England. Yeah, Tim Henman's England, as Mitchell said. But yeah, as Shahan said, comment on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and all that. Who you think will finish where in the Six Nations, and yeah, whoever is closest to the sixth in order will win some form of prize. It might be some form of pizza, but I might be going ahead of myself there. But moving the conversation on, we talked briefly last week about the Super Bowl and Tom Brady versus Mahomes. This conversation that Tom Brady is the GOAT, the greatest of all time in American football. I disagree with that, but there is that conversation happening that Tom Brady is the GOAT. But before we can have the conversation of who is the GOAT, we have to have a conversation of what is a GOAT and what makes a GOAT. And Mitchell brought this conversation up, so I think it's only right that Mitchell begins the conversation. What makes the greatest of all time in any sport?
I think when you look at it in such a broad, you have to go with accomplishments, whether it's them as part of a team or them as part of a team and them individually. So we take Tom Brady. You take someone like Tom Brady. It's like New England. He's won been to 9 Super Bowls, won 5, won 6.
Yeah, and that'll be the 10th one they'll be going to now, isn't it?
Yeah, this is his 10th. But then you look at it.
Six.
But then you look at his personal achievements, and it's like he's never been held in that high regard. You compare him to someone like an Aaron Rodgers, who's meant to be one of the greatest talents of all time, and it's then drawing a line of how much do you get for talent, how much do you get for achievement. And personally, only a couple of guys in this chat might get it. I think I'd say my best example for a GOAT would be the wrestler Chris Jericho.
Right,
Jericho's done it. He's done it big time in WWE and WCW, being multiple champions. He's been PWI, like the Pro Wrestling Insider. He's been their top. I'm sure he made it once as their top wrestler of the year in the world. And then when you look at him, his success, he's done success in America, as I said, with WWE, WCW, and now AEW. He's went east to Japan and been huge in New Japan, which is something that is very hard to do because the styles are just so different. And then also like he can do British wrestling, British style wrestling as well. So he's got accomplishments all over, and he's still able to keep going, which is I think he's come to the end. So I think when you look at all his achievements, how long he's done it for, I think that's what makes it go.
That brings me a good point, Mitchell, then, because I think Brady has accomplished like a brilliant record essentially. Because I think he's the only one who's won the kind of most rings or most Super Bowls. He's on his 10th Super Bowl, and after leaving like a partnership with himself and Belichick, and then going into a different team with under a different coach, and in the first year making that Super Bowl, I think is brilliant accomplishment. But that's a predominantly American sport. So does that make him a GOAT all over the world? Or does that make him a GOAT in America? Or just the followers of England?
I think that's the thing. Like if you're taking it sport by sport, yeah, I think you have to take it sport by sport because every sport's different. So a GOAT in American football, you could possibly make comparisons to a GOAT in rugby or a GOAT in who's called a GOAT in football, but like the criteria you're looking at for every person slightly changes because what they do is different.
I agree with you, Mitchell, about each sport has different criteria. Because, Bob, I'm going to come to you about, in Rangers terms, if I think of the greatest of all time on Rangers, I think of Paul Gascoigne. But does Paul Gascoigne meet your definition of GOAT when it comes to Rangers Football Club?
Yeah. Is he the greatest of all time? Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult. You look, when you consider the sort of names like Loudrop, for instance, world quality player. But Gaza, yeah, it's I'm making a lot of noises and not actually saying too much here. He's definitely one of the greatest of all time for us. I think a lot of people would be very quick to say McCoist, but in terms of Rangers, McCoist has been brilliant. But I don't think you can really say he's not done much outside of, well, he went to Sunderland and didn't really do anything there. So I think
who's really done anything at Sunderland?
What's that?
Who's really done anything?
If I get to jump in just on what you're saying, because it links in with one of my points. So when Robert's there talking about Rangers greatest of all time, and he's talking about Loudrop and he's talking about Gascoigne, and you start thinking about players like Alberts and all the rest of it, right? I think to be greatest of all time, you have to have three things. You need to have the titles and the championships, okay? You need to have the stats. You need to be good at what you do, because you're not very great at anything if you're not good at it, right? So, and then I also think there needs to be influence. There needs to be inspiration. So you look at Michael Phelps. So Michael Phelps won the historic 8 gold medals in the swimming in the Olympics, but then he took $1 million from his sponsor and he started up a foundation that works with children. So do their aspirations off the park and their inspirations and their influences off the park?
I don't think aspirations
come into the...
No, I don't think that comes into it at all. I think to be good at a sport, you need to be good at the sport, and anything you do outside the sport is completely separate. You can be a good person and be the greatest of all time, but it's all about that sport for me.
I wasn't saying the inspiration was the be all and end all. It has to be that three. You have to be good at it. You have to have the stats and the championships behind it. But I think there's that kind of the kind of personal aspect about it as well. So when we're talking about Alan McCoist, Alan McCoist came back and took on the job for Rangers when nobody else would. Worked through it.
Yeah,
and, that's just where I'm at. Just where I'm at. It's just I think it's another aspect that could be added on top of that.
I think the Alan McCoist taking the job on when nobody else would. That comes down to the same argument of Lee McCulloch sticking with Rangers through all the leagues. Did anybody want him anyway? That's the sort of thing that I think.
No.
That's
harsh.
Lee McCulloch stuck with Rangers from the very bottom. The reason he stuck with him was because they were paying him a healthy salary for a start.
Yes.
And also he wasn't inundated.
He likes Hedges and Berwick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and he wasn't inundated with offers from anywhere else. And it's same with Alan McCoist. Like Ali McCoist, he got to manage the club that he doesn't hide his support for. Nobody else wanted him as a manager. He got to manage Rangers. Why wouldn't you just go and do it? So I don't think that. I think it plays into the nice narrative that the Lee McCurrick story does anyway. Look at him, he stuck with us. Yeah, he stuck with us, but it's because if he didn't, he'd lose his house, he'd lose his car, and his kids wouldn't eat. So, there we go.
Can I interject there, Bob? I think I agree with what Bob's saying. Like, if you go, like as Bruce said, like the third, like for Bruce's third point is their status, what they do, and I think that's part of the problem with GOAT discussions is it comes down to personal preference. So I think like when you say I think those things that Bruce said are probably right, but I think the personal status, I think that will change depending on who you are and how you define that. Like as Martin said, it comes down to how much influence you have in that sport.
Exactly, I kind of agree with that as well, because I think influence is the kind of end product. If you're good at your job and you are shown in public constantly, then you inspiring people through that kind of exposure that you have into media and things like that should be your end product. But that shouldn't define you as a GOAT. That should be something you're willing to do, you're wanting to do.
Now, I would say in sport where the problem is where a lot of sports that have a lifespan of being at the top. You look at Tiger Woods, he was at the top for a good portion of time, then he started getting injuries, and now he's nowhere near. He sort of started building back up again.
And then he started talking about
off the course antics sort of got the better of him.
18 holes.
And then
I feel like
I was a 19th hole that was a problem.
But that's the thing. Like sometimes the kind of off the court antics have a impact on your reputation, so therefore your influence. So it kind of all links into together.
It didn't make Maradona any less of a player.
Shahan, that's my point. I was just saying that I'm quite would be interested to know your guys' opinion of once you are kind of classed as the greatest in your sport in a particular field, is it possible to lose that kind of banner of being the greatest? Like Armstrong, cyclist, won multiple competitions, and then he got found out for doping. Is he therefore not the greatest anymore because he cheated to get there?
Well, in Martin's argument, because he was doping, that only ruined his reputation, therefore didn't make him the greatest.
Well, I have this opinion on things like that though. I think there should be Olympics where you're just allowed to take as many drugs as possible. Let's see how quick the body can go. Let's actually see what we can do.
To be fair, Martin, we could find that out the new because Shahan's got a treadmill behind him. So on you go, Shahan.
Incredible 4 seconds.
I don't know if you can tell, but I don't use that. I don't know if you know, but I don't use the treadmill. I don't know if you can tell.
We can tell you the last 4 seconds, though.
But I can also tell that actually every person in this chat doesn't use a treadmill. By the looks of our faces.
Gavin.
Yes, James.
You were talking about Neil Armstrong in the cycling.
Lance
Armstrong, the cyclist, and how his doping has not made him the GOAT in cycling. Yeah. Do you think being a role model for the sport and people who watch the sport and maybe inspire to be a great in that sport is a factor in being a GOAT?
Very, very quickly, James, I just need to say something. Your Lance Armstrong blipper is worse than my Rangers surviving blipper 2 weeks ago.
and worse than me thinking Bournemouth played in the English Premier League.
It's all right, we're writing down all these bloopers.
All I can say is that at least Neil Armstrong has a legacy that is present. The current Rangers Football Club not. But going to Gavin and the question I asked him, does being a role model for future generations play a part in being a GOAT in a sport?
Before I answer that, I'm going to say, it shows that we're not professionals at this. I think it's a good job we're not professional as well, the both because we would not get our paychecks. But yeah, I do think being a role model is integral. Definitely, it's a very important part of being the greatest and being able to, as you said, especially when it comes to the younger generation, inspiring them to go on and fulfil their goals. And Bruce commented on aspirations and such, but I think role models kind of do come into it but it's also one of those things where you look at sports across the board. Greatest of all time GOATs, they come in certain, like, always come in timelines. So you look at Maradona, Pele compared to Messi and Ronaldo. Possibly argue Neymar and Mbappe are up there. Maybe Mbappe and Joao Felix will be the next one in football. But can you compare them with each other? Can you compare the best out of Maradona and Pele to Messi and Ronaldo to the future? Because there's different times, different timelines, different opponents. Money's become a massive factor now. Technology's improved in everything that we do. Is that a comparison that you can make and you're willing to make? And the same thing as well with the guy saying earlier about foundations and such being a role model. I think if you look back in the 60s, there wasn't much kind of news coverage about people's outside of the sport involvement, whereas now it's very at the front line of what they do. So it's one of the things that it's hard to compare.
I think that the point you've made, that the exposure to social media and the kind of instant news has actually changed a lot of people's opinions of what a GOAT should provide. And that has become one of the issues, that they should have a good kind of moral code about them as well at the same time.
I want to pick up on the point that Gavin said as well. The point when you said about how you compare the eras, you look at football, you look at Maradona, you look at the drink, all the substance abuse he had, and you look at say go for an English player like Paul Merson. Paul Merson was a cracking player back in his day, but you look at him now, you put him, you go, would he fit into a team now? You go, no, it wouldn't work. Then you look at someone like Ronaldo. I'd say Ronaldo's probably a better. My personal opinion, I think Ronaldo's a better example of this than Messi. You look and Zlatan Ibrahimovic. You look at the shape that they're in. You go back 20, 30 years. Players wouldn't put that much effort in to play for that long. Yes, they're getting paid a load, but they love playing football. They love the game so much they're willing to sacrifice so many things to make sure they get as long as they want. So I think when you're talking about GOATs, I think one thing you have to take into account and look at is go, could I see this player dominating as they did now?
I agree with you, Mitchell, and I think the generational impact is definitely a key role in what makes a GOAT. I know a lot of Celtic fans. I've mentioned Celtic, so I'll take a drink.
Which are a bunch of GOATs.
A lot of my fellow fans of the football club that I support, they mention Jimmy Johnston as the best ever player to ever played for the team that I support. But when I remember the team that I support, and looking back, I just think of Henrik Larsson, and I just think that he is a player on the pitch that he did things that I cannot remember any other player doing. He was just a different level, and in my eyes, he is the GOAT to me, because there's a bit of sentiment to that. I've got a connection with him which I do not have with Jimmy Johnston and Billy McNeil and other greats of the team that I support. And of course, in sport, I think Lionel Messi is up there because I have seen him play live, and I haven't seen Maradona and Pele play live. But before we go on to the next topic, I'd just like to go for a very quick fire round. Who is the GOAT for every sport? It is a very difficult question, and I don't expect there to be...
What, like just an overall GOAT?
Overall GOAT in sport. It is a very tough question, so I expect different answers. And if it's not what you think when concluding on it, don't worry about. But it's just an instant reaction. So
can I clarify something? Is pie eating a sport? Because if so, then Bob's got that nailed.
Yeah. So Gavin,
I'm quite offended. I thought I had that.
So Gavin, your GOAT is Bob. That is.
If pie eating is classed as a sport, then yeah. But if pie eating is not classed as a sport, then or pizza eating, then no. I think I might need to go to the drawing board again and change my answer.
Well, competitive eating is a sport.
We'll include pizza
It's a
eating
sport.
and pie eating as a sport, but we'll also ask for a different answer. So,
See, while we think about this, I just had a point. Sorry.
Oh, what was your point? Very quickly, then we'll do the quick fire round.
I forgot now, so just carry on.
Okay. So Martin,
I had it in my mind, it's gone now.
Actually,
okay, Martin, we'll come to you first. A goat for every sport. Who would you say?
I've got about 12 names written down here and different reasons for it, but I'm going to have to say Ronaldo, the current one, not the one who kept getting injured, because the one that kept getting injured would have been the best.
Okay. Mitchell?
I know I said Chris Jericho earlier, but I'm going to change my mind to someone. I'm going to say Jonah Lumu from the All Blacks in rugby. He was a player. He could, I think, still now he could run you over, or he could run round you and dazzle you with skill. I still think to this day and age he could, especially in an All Black setup, be the best player in the world for rugby, and just be the greatest of all time in sports.
Okay, Bruce.
Michael Jordan.
Oh yeah.
Good job. Bob. You're on mute.
That deep thought.
See, I was just having a think that I've been on. Is it Redgraves? Steve Redgrave.
Yeah, good show. Good show.
But it's different.
Gavin.
I'm going to go with Michael Jordan as well, but for the reasons of he showed that you can compare different eras in sport. He played from a rookie up to when he was a Hall of Famer, and he played with different players, different groups, and outshone them all.
Shahan.
Also played with Looney Tunes.
And that too. It shows you interdimensional activity there.
I would have gone with Ronaldo, but just to give you a different perspective, I would say Lewis Hamilton, only because of his involvement outside of sport as well, and what he does. And I know that some people think that that's not really such sports related, but that's my.
That's sports related, but Schumacher's better.
Another conversation this week has been the Tokyo Olympic Games. Obviously supposed to be held in 2020. COVID delayed that and moved to 2021. There was an opinion poll out this week which said that 80% of people that lived in Japan believed that Olympic Games should not go ahead this summer because of COVID. Gavin, public health is obviously an issue, but the Olympic Games is a big deal worldwide, not just in Japan. Should the Olympic Games really go ahead this year, despite the pandemic that we're all going through?
I think it's definitely a hard one, especially because there was so much anticipation for it, and especially with the increased revenue that it could bring in for a nation. But the fact that there's been a poll taken of the locals, it needs to definitely be looked at, and their opinions do need to be considered eventually, I think. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to be inviting tourists into the country because they won't be able to. So I do think it's something that needs to get looked at, definitely.
I just think I think it's something that Olympic board should definitely look into. But do you consider Olympic sports as an elite sport? If you do, and then it doesn't go ahead, then we should stop playing football and rugby and American football, essentially. Yeah, but if it's not considered an elite sport, then no, we shouldn't play it.
Isn't the Olympics? Weren't the Olympics founded for amateur sports people anyway? I'm sure that if you look into it, the Olympics were not originally.
They're not supposed to be a professional. That's as soon as you go professional boxer, you can't compete in the Olympics anymore.
So that means that Shahan and his treadmill's got a chance of competing then.
So let's look at this from a public health perspective, okay? You've got all these countries coming with their delegations into the country. So the International Olympic Committee, the head of the International Olympic Committee, and the Japanese government have said that vaccination isn't a vaccination isn't a condition for competing. So you've got all these delegations coming out of the country. Some might not be vaccinated. Looking into Japan haven't even started the vaccination program yet. They are starting with their medical workers at the end of February. They've got 36 million people 65 and upwards that they'll be vaccinating from April, and they're expecting that to take around 3 months. So even, I know they're not going to be fans or anything, but the majority of Japan's not going to have their vaccination in place. You've got all these different delegations coming from across the world into this country. Some of them might not be vaccinated. I know the vaccination doesn't, it doesn't make you immune and everything, but yeah, how do people think about it, taking it from those kind of statistics that I managed to pick out of the Guardian?
I think the vaccination rollout is a big thing, especially if you're expecting every country to compete, knowing that the third world countries cannot afford to get a vaccination program and roll it out. So it's one of those things, do you isolate, kind of very 2020 word that we've kind of got used to using, but do you isolate half of the competitors because they don't have the vaccination available to them?
I think isolation's going to come into it, but unfortunately with them being, whether you consider them elite athletes or not, they can't sit for 2 weeks. I mean, they're actually into the Olympics now. This is the pinnacle of what they're doing. They can't sit in a hotel room for 2 weeks and then go out and just go. I mean, compete, you can imagine the gymnastics and stuff trying to sit in a bedroom, trying to practice for their footprints in the ceilings and
from what I've read, Denmark and Israel have vowed to have their delegations inoculated, but that's only two delegations that I'm aware of. Do you know? And again,
I just think people as kind of viewing audience all around the world are looking for something else to excite them through this process, might be completely against this, but as Japan as a country, and obviously 80% people saying we should go ahead with cancelling the Olympics, and I think that is something that should be considered by the Olympic board.
So Shahan, so for the amusement and entertainment of the world, we should put these people at risk.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's
that's similar to what you said.
Yeah, I'm saying that, but exactly, I'm saying that, but not that's not what I think. I don't think they should go ahead. My personal opinion is that they shouldn't. But I think that a lot of people around the world will want something else to kind of boost them through this year, essentially. Because I don't think us being completely COVID free till maybe next year.
The big problem is the people who are competing, although yes, it's a deadly virus, the people who are competing aren't they the ones that are most likely to die. There is a possibility of them dying, but it's a lot slimmer possibility in these 16 to, I can't see many of them being over 30. I've not actually yet, but
so is it worth bringing all these international delegations together, Martin?
Well, the issue is bringing viruses into Tokyo rather than anything else. So it would have to be a proper isolation before they go into Tokyo. Whether they're actually able to do that or not, and if they're actually going to follow it, a lot of these countries will do as much as they can to win. You look at the Russians and places like that; they'll just say, "Let's just say that we're going to isolate and be out in the gym 2 days every day of the week." And it's very difficult to say something that's going to give you the upper hand on everybody else, and you're not going to take in the Olympics.
I think it's something that they've got to look into properly, because if they do decide with going ahead with it, they've got to even look at vaccinating all the essential, the athletes as well as the team members and the trainers and things like that.
The whole delegation.
Yeah, exactly. They have to vaccinate every single person before they can go ahead with it. I don't think which I don't think is a viable option. But then, does Tokyo provide that because the Olympics are getting held there? Should their own countries provide that they were going ahead and competing in the Olympics? You know what I mean? What happens? How does that get judged?
Is a lot of the countries don't want to be seen to then be queue jumping. So they don't want to be doing a Who was it again down south? Was it Chesterfield?
Chesterfield.
So they don't necessarily want to be seen by the public to be doing a Chesterfield as it was as assumed. They don't want to be queue jumping just to get a vaccination so they can go and take part in their sport.
But the thing is, places like when there was the Olympics in London, there was viruses and stuff going round all the Olympic villages because they always, and I believe there was a great amount of condoms that were sort of passed out as well, because they were all interacting with each other, and they're all, so you have got that issue of when they're there, can swiping left constantly and just getting a bit of the...
I didn't know I was going.
Swiping right. But, Mitchell,
you're married.
Yes, James. The Olympics, they obviously bring a lot of money into the hosting country when a lot of fans come in to the country, not only to view the sport that's taking place, but to embrace the culture. Is it really worth Japan's time to host the Olympic Games with empty stadiums?
I was like that. Like they're not gonna get the same. They're not gonna get anywhere near the same revenue that an Olympic year should bring. Because there's gonna be you're gonna have so many countries that are still on the travel on. If they, I don't know if they do have a travel ban. To be honest, I've not read up. But if they've got a travel ban list, then it'll then pose question as if say Britain are on it. They let British athletes in. You'll then have maybe Japanese nationals who are still stuck here, and they're like, "Well, how can't we come home? You're letting them in. Why can't we?" And then it brings in so many other debates that I think the headaches that it would cause wouldn't be worth it. And I'll be honest, I don't watch much of the Olympics. I can't be bothered with like watching someone run 100 meters in 10 seconds. I don't find it entertaining.
Oh, Usain Bolt runs under 10 seconds.
I know, I was going to say, watching Usain Bolt turn around and laugh at people is the best thing ever.
Mitchell, 2 points. It's not entertaining because you've not seen Shahan run the treadmill yet. The point is,
maybe in the next episode. Maybe in the next week. Maybe in the next week's episode.
I completely agree with you about the
That'll be a whole segment considering the time it takes.
No, but Mitchell, I completely agree with bringing people back in their own country, because that was the same issue that was happened in Australia recently, where they were bringing in celebrities to judge on their version of The Voice, as well as the Australian Open that was due to take place, and it's caused a lot of outrage over there.
And there was a few players in the Australian Open that tested positive for COVID as well.
Yeah, no, it was. I'm sure it was a hotel staff.
Mm-hmm. Going back to Gav's point about going to Australia, watch a couple of programs, and Adam Hill's comedian, he went back to Australia and he had to quarantine in a hotel for 14 days. To Lincoln Martin's point, you look at these people who are going to the Olympics. You've got, I think, some of the open sports are like your marathons and that. They're not going to be able to go, wait for 2 weeks and eventually be able to go, okay, let's go for this run. And if they do, they'll have to delay the games or have everyone have like a staggered entry into the country, and it will just take up so much time and so much logistics. It will probably hurt Japan more and probably hurt the events. Because you imagine bringing in like the Kenyan marathon runners, Sun Mo Farah, people like that, and you've got to tell them, okay, you've got to quarantine for 2 weeks. You're then got to go, okay, well, I need another month to prepare and get back to that same spot. Because it doesn't take, it's not like they can just, okay, I think there's one a couple of years ago, turned around 6 months, went, I want to be in the Olympics, I'm going to do rowing. But most people, they're training years and years, and they finally get it. And when they do get it, they put in some of the hardest training for 3-4 solid months. And you're just like, 2 weeks would absolutely destroy that.
So do you think then that they should maybe, like, if this does go ahead, that they should maybe go across a few months beforehand, quarantine for 2 weeks, then train for a couple of months before joining the Olympics? Then that's.
I definitely. I'm going to go jump on to Mitch's point. It's a massive thing that it's only every 4 years. Ken, all these people are trying to win an Olympic medal, and they have a pinnacle. They have the year that they know that they're going to be the best.
Yeah.
Whether it's right, I'm going to be 24 this year as opposed to being 20 my first year, and 24 is the year that I'm going to have my best shot chance of doing it. And there's a lot of people whose whole life is building up to this 1 year that they've missed last year, and they're hoping to get this year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Mark's point now.
We'll do a very quick
Mark,
fire
again,
round.
is that worth the risk?
If Tokyo believe that it is, and if they put everything into a correct system, and they can have a system where they can believe that everybody isn't going to get infected or pass it on or bring it back, then yes.
We'll do a very, very, very quick fire round. Just simple question. Should the 2020 Tokyo Olympics take place this summer in 2021? So, Bruce, should they go
No.
ahead? Yes or no? No. Gavin?
No.
No.
No. Martin?
Yes.
Jahan?
Yes.
Yes. Mitchell?
No.
No.
James?
Okay. So, I would say yes, and I would also agree with Martin in the sense of just get the athletes over earlier,
Yeah.
get them in the isolation period earlier, and let them train afterwards.
So scrap like opening. So basically, I'd say if you're doing that, you have to scrap both the opening and closing ceremonies.
Oh yeah, definitely.
No, yes, just focus on the sport, get the sport done, and allow the Olympics to go ahead, but all the extras just put aside for this year.
And no Phil's Olympics.
But it looks like the Sports Hut podcast has made a very definitive position with a 3 each decision on that question. But before we finish, we'll move over to Gavin, who has got a nice question to finish off with. So Gavin, what's your question for this week?
Well, one of the main features of this channel has appeared to be the round the table feature that we've started. So my question for us for the round the table feature, I want 10 seconds. I want to know who your winners and your losers are for this week in sports, and I'm going to start off with Martin.
Is that 10 seconds each, or
10 seconds each? 10 seconds for your winner, 10 seconds for your loser. I want you to
You've
tell
got
me
10
who they
seconds
are
left.
and why they are.
I'm adding it 4 seconds now. Or?
Time's
1
up.
second
Right,
now.
so-
I'm going to go. Who's your winner and loser, mate?
My winner is Luke Shaw, and I got Luke Shaw because Man United have spent 15.4 million on tellies and brought him in to replace him. And at that point, Shaw's lifted his game and is the best that I've seen him play. And they look like he's on his way under Mourinho.
Loser?
My loser, Gareth Bale, mainly because it turns out Zidane was right.
Fair.
We'll go to Shahan next.
So I thought we were doing teams.
Oh no,
It
go
can
to
be anything you want.
Okay,
Go
right.
team.
So
Anything's
I
fun.
will say winner for me
8
would be
seconds.
Everton, because they had a brilliant comeback. Man, you were up 2-0, and they decided to bring it back 2-2. Then they went 3-2 in the last minute goal, man. Brilliant. And then at the same point, Man U would be the loser because they had a decent win going. They were comfortable at 2-0. Then 2-2, they were struggling again, but then 3-2, and then the last minute tackle, the worst tackle I've ever seen in my life. And yeah, there we go.
Apart from in the mirror.
Yeah, well, that.
I'm going to go to Bruce now.
So my winner this week is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. This weekend he reached 501 career goals in the AC Milan game.
Loser?
My loser this week, Mike Dean in VAR for the red card.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Need we
cost
say
me
more?
points in my.
Can you do 20 second more tapes of that just to make sure that the decision is made is correct?
Can we just look over that again?
Right, James, we'll go to you.
I'm going to go for 2 unique takes and say that the winner of the week is Joe Root. His 110th match for England, he got a double century. Absolutely fantastic. Even though I'm not a cricket fan, I know that is a fantastic
No,
statistic.
that's good.
And my loser of the week is somebody called Yoshiro Mori. I didn't know him before this week, and I don't think I'll know him after this week. But he resigned as the chair of the Tokyo Olympics, which we've just talked about, because he made a sexist remark. And he has forgone the opportunity to oversee the Olympic Games, and that is a loser for any remark, because that is an absolute privilege to oversee.
No problem. Mitchell?
just to break the mold, I'll start with my loser first. My loser, despite them winning 3-2 this week, is Newcastle. They finished the game with 9 men, one red card, but the number of injuries sustained will hurt them in the long run. Wilson and Fernandez. It's just got to go. And the winner, going back to wrestling, I'm going to say All Elite Wrestling. And to explain for this one a little bit, I know I'll run over my set time here. They're the first company in years, but they've managed to strike a deal where they've got their own roster. They've struck a deal with Impact Wrestling, so they've got all their roster. They've now struck a deal with New Japan. So three of the biggest wrestling companies are all now working together, along with NWA I missed as well. So they've got a huge pool roster, huge talent, and they're going back to what most people would class as the good old days with the territories.
Right, Mitchell gets minus 50 seconds yet next time.
So your winner is a made-up sport.
Exactly.
Gavin,
you take a spine buster.
Gavin,
I have.
Your winner and loser in 20 seconds.
My winner this week is Scott McTominay. He's kind of hit a decent run of form, got a couple of goals that makes me look forward as a Scotland fan to see him how he gets on, especially come to the Euros. My loser this week is the Chelsea women's team, who had an opportunity to extend their lead at the top of the table, and they unfortunately lost, ending a 33-game unbeaten run. So yeah, they're my loser this week.
Gav, I was thinking that the women's team could maybe come in and show the men's team how to do it, because 3 games back to back would be quite good for Chelsea.
To be fair, we're seem to have the Tuchel touch, as I'm going to call it, has gained momentum, and we're getting.
As long as the Rudiger touch, it should be sweet.
Is it just me that is it just me that thinks the Tuchel touch sounds a bit dodgy?
Going back
to be subject of an inquiry in the next few years.
Going back to week 1, we may have found that there is a good time to sack a manager, but perhaps there's a lot of time for Tuchel to see if his appointment is good with Chelsea or not.
To see if Tuchel's touch is worthy.
Just wait until Tuchel comes in and goes, I have been touched by the Tuchel touch.
But there is also a lot of time to see the Six Nation predictions, what makes a GOAT, and should the 2020 Tokyo Olympics take place in the summer of 2021. So make sure to
2 hours or less.
On the Facebook page, comment on Twitter, comment on the YouTube page, and make sure to like on Facebook, follow on Twitter, and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in this week. We will be back next Monday for the latest episode of the Sports Hub podcast.